gosh. My name is Nick Chandler, and I'm a grandson too. Hold on. And I just want to say a little something about my papa. And I wrote it down so I wouldn't go all day. It was hard to figure out what to say today. I didn't know how to sum up all the things I loved about Papa in 5 minutes. So instead I thought about what Papa would want me to say, how he'd want his life remembered through my eyes. I think he'd want me to recall some fond memories and funny stories. I think he'd want me to talk about what I liked most about him. And I think he'd want me to finish with a few minutes on the spiritual impact his life had on me. So that is what I will attempt to do. First, for the fond memories. Once in a while, my family would visit my papa's church in Selma. I see a lot of faces from that church, in fact, today. These were amazing days. I remember I always thought he was some kind of famous person. The service started with him sitting on stage in this big chair that at the time I was sure was designed for some kind of king. Then it was up front where he would begin by asking our whole family to stand up so he could introduce and brag about how awesome we were. Then, with all these people watching, he would sing and preach in his deep, booming voice, ending every service with a long, soulful prayer. After church, we'd head over to the parsonage to have lunch and play. My favorite lunches at Papa's and Nanny's were turkey sandwiches with wheat bread and Miracle Whip. And they always had diet sodas in the can, which for some reason was so cool at that age for me. After lunch, my papa would open up the toy chest and we'd play together. He'd end most of our play sessions by placing us on his knee. I loved when he did this. He would pretend to pull out his teeth and he'd give us this back like this. And he'd talk to me in his old man voice. And I'm not sure who laughed more in those moments, me or my papa. He really cracked himself up most times. And I swear, those times playing with us grandkids, he had just as much fun as we did. When it was time to go, he'd always help us pack up the car, and then him and my nanny would stand on the street and wave goodbye as we drove off. I know it sounds like a cheesy movie, but I remember many times looking out the back window and feeling bad that we were leaving my mom, my papa, and nanny. My mom thought they'll be fine, Nick. These are some of my fondest memories of Papa. Now for a few funny ones. To be honest, there are tons of funny stories. If you knew Papa, he was a heck of a storyteller and could get us all laughing at the drop of a hat. In fact, he was so crazy about his storytelling that we had to develop a system. One that me and my wife have now also had to develop. Seems I got a little bit of Papa. And the system was that every time he started to tell a story, if I had already heard it, I was supposed to raise my hand. This was my way of telling him, you've already told me this story, Papa, you don't have to go through it. Of course, this didn't always stop Papa. Because the truth was, storytelling was as much for him as it was for us. Anyway, back to a few funny stories. The first one happened when I was young and staying a weekend at my papa and nanny's. It was time for my nightly bath, and before I headed in, I asked if I could eat some pineapple. It's kind of random, but my nanny explained that they didn't have any pineapple and that I'd have to find something else. So the bath I went, and when I got out, there was a plate of pineapple on the dinner table. I inquired, "Where did you get this?" And my papa said, "Well, I just went in the backyard and picked it from the pineapple tree." And in my young mind, I couldn't tell if he was joking or not. And I was trying to figure out, I'd never seen a pineapple tree in their backyard. But then at that age, I didn't really know what a pineapple tree looked like, so the funny thing was my papa never told me that he actually went to the store while I was in the bath. So for many years, I actually thought there was a pineapple tree in their backyard in Selma. I don't know why I always remember this story, but for some reason it really stuck out to me. My last funny story happened very recently. Kyoko and I were visiting my papa at home shortly after they put him on hospice. Now, I didn't know exactly what hospice was, so I started to ask him, what is this hospice thing? And he explained that he had a new nurse and got special attention, and he started a new medication. And then he began to smile a little. And I said, "Oh yeah, really, what medication?" And he told me, "It just really helps me relax." I said, "Oh, that's great, Papa, what is it?" And then he kind of blushed. I go, "Papa, what medication is it?" And he kind of, looked away, and he didn't want to tell me. I go, "Papa, what are you taking?" And he goes, I didn't want to do it at first, but they told me, and it really helps me relax. I said, just tell me what it is. And he said, marijuana. And I was like, now if you knew Papa Bill, right, he never smoked a cigarette, drank a beer. I'm not sure he's ever seen an R-rated movie, so the fact that he was taking marijuana really shocked me. It wasn't until about 2 hours after I got home that I got a call from Papa, and he was barely able to talk at the time. But through his whispers, I finally came to understand that he had gotten the name wrong. He was actually on morphine. And I don't think I've laughed that hard in a long time. So those are some of my fondest and my funny memories. Now for the part that's going to make me cry. Now for what I love the most about Papa. Papa Bill was the most optimistic man I ever knew. He lived in a world where he expected to do, see, and experience good, almost greatness, and sometimes to outrageous proportions. If you were to ask my Papa a week ago on his deathbed what he expected to do with the remainder of his life, he probably would have described in his quiet, frail voice some grand scheme to get the whole nursing home in a room so he could sing old gospel songs and preach to him. And he would have really believed that it was possible. I remember as a boy I used to watch him fill out those letters you would get in the mail, the ones that explained in big letters, you just won $1 million, and then in small print, if you're picked out of 10 million people and fill out this 3-page form. And every time, I swear, he filled out those letters, you could see in his eyes, I'm going to win this one. But perhaps the best part of his optimism was how it affected his relationships. In no other man have I ever seen an ability to see to the heart of people the way my Papa did. It didn't matter who you were, how you acted, or even if you hurt him. He would love you as if you were Jesus himself. God gave my Papa a really special gift to see people as God intended them to be, not as they were. Just like those letters, it didn't matter how many times he lost, he kept filling out those forms. In the same way, it was how he loved people. It didn't matter how many times we screwed up, how many times we lied, sinned, hurt, or hated. He would always love us as if we were blameless. I searched my memories of Papa, and I can't remember one instance where I heard him talk bad about someone, raise his voice, or act in anger. And it wasn't because he was super disciplined or great at controlling his tongue. It was because he believed and saw the best in people, even when the whole world couldn't. This leads to the spiritual impact my Papa had on my life. It began when he introduced me to Jesus at the age of 7, sitting on the steps of the church. He walked me through a tract that explained how much God loved me, and then when I died, Jesus wanted to be with me. Then, throughout the rest of his life, my Papa exemplified that love to me in every form. But it wasn't until a few days before he died that I realized the magnitude of the impact his life had on me. Kyoko and I were visiting him. He was barely conscious and unable to feed himself at this time. Kyoko, this is my wife, the amazing woman she was, sat on his bed and began to feed him small bites of food while I struggled not to cry. I didn't know how to take this moment. Here was a giant of a man I had looked up to as a spiritual hero, a man who seemed bigger than life itself. Now broken, frail, and barely able to move or speak. As we left, I leaned down to hug him, and as I leaned in, I said, I love you, Papa. And the last thing my Papa ever said to me, the only thing I could actually even understand that day, was he said, I love you too, Nick. I did leave in tears that day, and driving home, I wrestled with what I just encountered. It seemed for the first time in my life I'd experienced darkness in a new way, and that way was death. As I thought about this concept of death, I became aware of how temporary our life is. When someone like Papa Bill could end up with a failing, broken body, what hope do we have? And it was as I asked myself this question, I realized that I already knew the answer. And I didn't know it because I had figured it out or because Papa had shown me throughout. I didn't know it because I had figured it out, but because Papa had shown me throughout his life. The greatest spiritual impact my Papa had on my life was his ruthless devotion to the eternal world through his love for Jesus and his love for others. My Papa understood that this life we live is temporary. Even he knew that eventually his body would fail him. And with that understanding, he made it his life's mission to live for God's kingdom. The kingdom that would never fail him, and the kingdom that he's in right now today. And if my Papa was standing here right now, He'd want all of you to know that your life too is temporary and your body too will deteriorate. And eventually all of us will be overtaken by death. But it doesn't have to end there. We're not meant to invest our time, money, and energy into this world. Instead, like my Papa, Jesus Christ offered his life for all of us. And to those who accept that offer and choose to live for God's kingdom, death will no longer be our final chapter, but rather, like my Papa, the beginning of eternal glory in heaven with Jesus.